She said it calmly, clearly, without the slightest hesitation. Once we're married, I'm not doing housework anymore. Her voice was cold, like water flowing over stone steady, emotionless. I looked up from my laptop, thinking I must have misheard. She was sitting across from me, her coffee still steaming, hair tied back neatly, her face composed and strangely alert. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her eyes stayed the same, no trace of humor, no spark of teasing. "I'm serious," she said, setting the cup down. "If you want a clean house, cooked meals, laundry done, then I expect to be compensated." At first, I thought she was mocking me, testing my reaction. But when I saw how she calmly folded her hands together, waiting for my response without blinking, I knew she wasn't playing. "Compensated?" I repeated slowly. "You mean money?" She nodded. "Exactly. I work, I spend my time, and my time has value. I deserve to be paid for it." The way she spoke reminded me of how she presented projects to clients, direct, confident, calculated. It wasn't the tone of someone discussing love or partnership. It was the tone of a professional negotiating terms. I left my coffee untouched as the steam faded away, my mind turning over. "Sarah, this is marriage," I said quietly. "We share things we don't pay each other." She tilted her head slightly, her tone unwavering. "You work 8 hours a day and get paid for it. I'll also be working just at home. The only difference is society dosante compensate. But as my husband, you can." For a few seconds, I said nothing. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, steady, cold, and sharp in the silence. She continued, her voice precise, almost rehearsed. "I've done the math. On average, I spend at least 25 hours a week cleaning, cooking, shopping, managing the house. If we calculate that at $20 an hour, that's about $2,000 a month. It's not much, but it's fair." She opened her bag, took out a neatly printed stack of papers, stapled and organized. She slid it across the table toward me. "This is the proposal." I looked down at the paper bullet points, bolded titles, organized categories. Domestic labor compensation agreement, cleaning fees, meal preparation rates, financial management, emotional support. There was even a section labeled paid time off. I read it 3 times, line by line, word by word. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice dry. She nodded, completely. I placed the papers back on the table, perfectly aligned. "And if I don't agree?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Then I won't do those things anymore. You can hire someone else." I took a deep breath, feeling like I was in a boardroom, not the apartment we shared as a couple in love. "Sarah," I said, "you're talking about marriage, not a company." She met my eyes, her voice level. "Marriage is a long-term contract. You just refuse to read the terms." The air in the room thickened. Light filtered through the blinds, splitting her face in 2, halves, one soft and familiar, the other cold and metallic. That's when I realized this wasn't anger. This was calculation. She'd thought it through, planned it, justified it. "You think marriage is about love," I said slowly, "not an exchange of services." She answered softly, but her words were hard. "Love doesn't pay bills, Ben." In that moment, I didn't feel angry, just hollow. Like when a doctor delivers bad news and you sit there, trying to reassemble what you just heard into something that makes sense. She went on, her tone even, detached. "You should think about it. I'd rather be transparent now than disappointed later." She stood up, straightened her jacket, and picked up her brown leather bag. I'm heading to the office. Once you've read it, leave your comments in the notes section. I left space for both our signatures. I didn't say a word. She leaned down, pressed a light kiss on my cheeks, so faint it barely touched my skin. Love you, she said. Then walked away. The door closed quietly behind her. In the apartment, there was only the ticking of the clock and the contract lying motionless on the table. I stared at it for a long time. Times New Roman font, size 12, justified margins, neat, professional. Like an official agreement. The title was bolded, Domestic Labor Compensation Agreement, and right then, I understood maybe this wasn't the end of love, but it was the beginning of something else. Something colder. Something with terms, signatures, and price tags. A relationship slowly turning into a ledger. The next evening, her parents invited us over for dinner. Nothing unusual, just a regular family meal. But the whole drive there, I couldn't stop thinking about that contract still sitting on the table. Sarah, on the other hand, was perfectly calm, driving, humming to the radio, occasionally smiling. Her composure made my chest tighten. Her father greeted us cheerfully at the door. How's the wedding planning going, you two? Sarah answered smoothly, it's going well. We're just finalizing a few ... terms. I froze. Her mother laughed. Terms. You to sound like you're signing a business deal. Sarah smiled faintly. It's better to define expectations before marriage, saves a lot of trouble later. Everyone laughed politely. But I knew what she really meant. Dinner went normally until she suddenly said, "Oh, by the way." I showed Ben the agreement I drafted about household responsibilities and compensation yesterday. The table went quiet. Her father frowned. Wait, you're serious? You want to get paid for doing housework? Sarah didn't hesitate. It's only fair, Dad. Labor deserves recognition, whether it's in an office or at home. Her mother sighed softly. Sarah, marriage isn't supposed to be about calculations. Sarah turned to her, still smiling. That's exactly why most marriages fail, Mum, because people don't calculate until it's too late. No one spoke after that. I looked at her calm, composed, completely unshaken. There was no anger in her eyes, no insecurity, just a strange, quiet confidence. After dinner, when we were alone in the kitchen, I said quietly, "You caught me off guard." She didn't look up. I just told the truth. You turned marriage into a contract. No, she said, drying her hands. I just made it transparent. I stared at her for a long moment, then said softly, "If equality feels suffocating, maybe it's not love anymore." She looked at me, eyes unreadable. "You'll understand," she said. Soon, the drive home was silent. The city lights flashed by, bright, distant, impersonal. And in that moment, I finally understood she wasn't planning a marriage. She was negotiating a deal. 3 days after that dinner, the apartment fell into an eerie kind of silence. No background music. No casual chatter. No laughter echoing through the kitchen. Everything between us became procedural, every word measured, every glance deliberate, every silence intentional. Sarah acted like nothing had happened. She still woke up early, made her coffee, left for work, came home at 6, opened her laptop, and started typing again. Not once did she mention the contract, but I knew she was waiting for me to respond, and I didn't, not immediately. I wanted to see what she'd do if I didn't play her game in those quiet days. She seemed to change in ways that weren't loud, but heavy. Not angry, not emotional, just distant, controlled, almost mechanical. The warmth she used to have, the tiny gestures, the laughter, the chaos, all of it was gone. She no longer asked what I wanted for dinner. She no longer leaned on my shoulder while watching TV. She no longer laughed at my dumb jokes. It felt like she had withdrawn something. Invisible, something essential. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The way she opened the fridge and wrote down what needed restocking. The way she stacked the mail by category, bills, subscriptions, wedding details. The way she typed on her laptop, fast, steady, emotionless. Every move calculated. It was unsettling watching love turn into efficiency. One night, I finally said something. Do you ever think maybe this whole contract thing went too far? She looked up from her laptop, her expression neutral. No, I think I'm just being realistic. You don't have to agree, but you can't deny it. Makes sense. I don't deny the logic, I said quietly. I just think love doesn't always need logic. Her tone was flat, unflinching. Logic is what keeps love from turning into resentment. That line stuck with me. I didn't even know how to respond. Later that night, when she went to shower, I sat at the kitchen table and reopened the contract. Domestic labor compensation agreement. The words looked different now, colder. I skimmed through the clauses until one line made me stop. If the husband fails to meet financial obligations on time, the wife reserves the right to withhold domestic services without prior notice. I read it 3 times. The language was clinical, precise, not written by a lover, but by a negotiator. She came out of the bathroom, hair damp, towel over her shoulders. When she saw what I was reading, she didn't even flinch. You're looking at the financial clause, she asked. Yeah, I said, still staring at the page. She nodded. That's necessary. Both sides should have defined responsibilities. I don't want our relationship to depend on moods. Feelings change. Commitments don't. I looked up at her. You really think this? I tapped the paper. This is what commitment looks like. Her voice was calm, firm. This protects love from being exploited. We sat there in silence. The clock ticked. I thought about the first time she came over to my place. How she laughed when I hung the curtains backwards. How she teased me for buying air freshener that smelled like a hospital. That woman wasn't sitting across from me anymore. Sarah, I said quietly, do you still love me? She paused. Her eyes softened, but only for a second. Then, love isn't the issue here. That answer cut deeper than any argument could. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard her typing from the living room, steady, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The glow from her laptop spilled faintly into the hallway, and that's when it hit me. She wasn't trying to destroy what we had. She was trying to control it, to systemize it, to make love predictable, measurable. When I finally drifted off near dawn, she was still out there, typing. The sound of the keyboard was soft, but it felt like nails sealing something shut. She didn't need someone to love. She needed someone to sign. A week passed before I decided I couldn't take the silence anymore. The apartment had become something else. Quiet, spotless, sterile. Everything was in its place. Every moment followed a routine. It didn't feel like home. It felt like a workspace. And Sarah, she wasn't my fiancée anymore. She was the manager of our shared life. That night, I came home early. She was at the dining table, laptop open, earbuds in, typing. The glow from the screen reflected off her face, calm, distant, untouchable. "Sarah," I said, "we need to talk." She took out her earbuds, her tone polite but flat. "About what?" "The contract." She raised an eyebrow. "It's not a contract, Ben. It's an agreement." "No," I said quietly. "It's a wall." She folded her arms, leaning back slightly. "You feel attacked." I feel. I paused, like love can't exist where everything has a price tag. Her tone was cool, steady. "You're confusing value with cost. I'm not asking to be bought. I'm asking to be respected." "That's not respect, Sarah. That's accounting." She gave a faint smile. Not kind, not cruel, just detached. "Accounting keeps people honest." I stared at her, disbelief mixing with something else. Exhaustion. "Do you even hear yourself? You think marriage is a ledger, not a bond." She tilted her head. "You think love alone sustains people. That's naive. Love is an emotion, not a structure. I'm trying to build something that lasts." Her words were logical. Too logical. "Do you really think I'd ever take advantage of you?" I asked, her voice dropped a notch. "I think if there are no boundaries, anyone can." The clock ticked between us, slow, precise, that, walked to the counter, poured a glass of water, and said quietly, "You're not preparing for a marriage. You're preparing for a war." She met my eyes, unwavering. "Not war, protection." "I don't believe in unconditional love, Ben. No one should." Something inside me broke at that, because in that moment I realized she didn't trust anyone, not even me. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. Her tone was measured, almost kind. "Then I'll assume you're choosing not to participate. I'll take care of my own side of things. Financially, logistically, emotionally, you mean?" "Separate lives?" "Separate, but civil," she said. "Fair." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it hurt. I used to think marriage meant sharing everything. "But to you, it's just risk management." She didn't flinch. "I call it maturity." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't recognize her at all. "Don't you ever feel lonely in all this logic?" I asked. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Lonely is better than being in debt." The way she said it, calm, final, left no room for argument. That night, I walked for hours through the neighborhood. The air was cold. The streets were quiet. I remembered our first date, how she said what she liked most about me was my honesty, my lack of agenda. I laughed to myself. Maybe that's exactly what she couldn't stand anymore. The fact that I still believed in love without terms. When I came back, the lights were still on. She was sitting on the couch, papers laid out neatly in front of her, a pen resting beside them. Without looking up, she said, "I added an appendix. Read it when you're ready." I looked at the papers, then at her, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't a fight between two lovers anymore. This was a negotiation between two people who both wanted to be right, even if it meant killing what they once cared about. After that night, I stopped arguing with her. I didn't bring up the agreement. I didn't ask for explanations, didn't try to reason, didn't even try to make her see my side. I just went quiet. I woke up early, left before sunrise, came home late when the city lights had already replaced the sun. She stayed the same, calm, composed, still working on her laptop at the dining table. That single piece of paper, the contract, never moved from its spot. It just sat there, flat and silent, like a ghost of our last conversation. At first, she didn't seem to notice. She was used to structure, to order. Maybe she thought my silence was just another form of routine. But silence has a weight of its own. It spreads, seeps into everything, the air, the meals. The way we walked past each other without looking, days turned into a rhythm of nothing. No fights, no affection. Just two people breathing in the same space, orbiting each other like strangers trapped in a shared orbit. I stopped asking what she wanted for dinner. I stopped asking how her day was. I stopped saying goodnight. And yet, every night, I still looked toward her door before lying down on the couch, out of habit. Maybe, or hope. The apartment felt hollow. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder than it used to. Even the ticking of the clock felt like judgment, marking every second of what used to be us. Then one evening, as I sat scrolling through nothing on my phone, she looked up from her screen and said quietly, "Are you trying to prove a point?" I didn't look up right away. I just exhaled. "No," I said, my voice calm, steady. "I'm just living the way you wanted, independent, defined, emotionless." For a moment, she didn't react. Then, something flickered across her face, a small crack in her composure. Her shoulders tightened, her fingers paused above the keyboard. "Are you punishing me?" she whispered. I shook my head. "No, I'm just learning how to love you. The way you ask me to." She stared at me, searching for something, maybe anger, maybe affection, but found neither. Just quiet. Then she turned away. That night, she sat by the window for hours. No laptop, no phone, just her and the dark city beyond the glass. The street lights flickered across her face, half shadow, half regret. I lay on the couch, not sleeping, just listening to the creak of the floorboards, to her breathing, soft and uneven. It sounded like someone trying not to cry, and in that stillness, I realized something simple and cruel. When love turns into calculation, when every gesture is measured and every word analyzed, then silence, that cold, heavy silence becomes the only fair response left. Because you can't argue with logic, but you can starve it. And that's what we were doing, starving the love we once had, piece by piece, in the name of fairness. The silence lasted almost 2 weeks. At first, Sarah stayed calm, perfectly composed, predictable, always in control. She still woke up at the same hour, made her coffee the same way, and worked behind that same glowing laptop screen as if nothing between us had changed. But something had, and slowly the quiet began to chip away at her. The way water erodes stone, soundless, but relentless. It didn't come out as anger. It came out in small, fractured ways. The subtle sigh when she opened the fridge and found it empty. The way she lingered by the table where the contract used to lie. The way she started closing doors more gently than before. Little actions that said more than any argument could. Then she started cooking again. Not every day. Just sometimes. No conversation, no explanations. I'd hear the faint clatter of pans, smell something faintly familiar, garlic, basil, butter, the language of an old life. Neither of us dared to speak aloud anymore. One night, she left a plate of spaghetti on the table, still warm, then went straight into her room. I ate it in silence. Every bite tasted like memory, the life we used to have, hidden under layers of pride and stubborn logic. The next night, she didn't cook. The night after, she did again. It became a rhythm, a quiet tug-of-war. Not about food, not about chores, but about power, about who would give in first. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew it wasn't about who was right anymore. It was about who could endure the silence longer. Then, one night, as I was getting ready for bed, she came out of the bedroom. She stood in the doorway for a moment, the light from the hall slicing her face in half, one side soft and human, the other still trying to be unshakable. "Are you really planning to live like this?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but not steady. I didn't turn. "I'm just following the system you built." She let out a breath, half laugh, half disbelief. "I didn't build it for you to use against me." I didn't answer, because maybe I was. Maybe my silence had become its own kind of weapon, sharp and precise, designed to show her what a world without emotion truly felt like. She took a step closer, her eyes reflecting the dim light, fragile but refusing to break. "I just wanted to be seen, Ben," she said softly, not ignored. I looked at her for a long time. The woman standing in front of me wasn't cruel. She was tired of being strong, of being logical, of trying to win at something that had no prize. "I never ignored you, Sarah," I said. "But I can't love someone who treats balance like it's more important than feeling." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "So your silence, is this your way of punishing me?" I shook my head. "No, it's me testing whether your kind of love can survive without the protection of rules." That stopped her. For the first time in weeks, her composure faltered completely. The mask slipped, and for one brief, flickering moment, I saw her again. The woman who once laughed so hard she spilled her coffee on my shirt, who used to talk about dreams instead of logistics. She turned away, her voice breaking into a whisper. I thought I was stronger than this. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And that night, I heard her cry, not loudly, quietly, like she was trying to keep it from existing. The kind of cry that only comes when the armor finally cracks, and all the words you've swallowed for too long start to leak out as sound. I didn't go to her. I couldn't. Maybe I was afraid that if I did, she'd see I was breaking too. So I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the sound of something we both refused to admit was dying. And in that silence, I understood something simple and cruel. Every agreement has a flaw, even the ones built on fairness, reason, and good intentions. Because no matter how logical love tries to be, the heart will always find a way to break through the rules meant to protect it. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds and fell across the table, where the contract still lay neat, silent, as if it hadn't torn a hole through us. Sarah sat across from me, her coffee untouched, growing cold. I just watched her. There was no anger anymore, no bitterness, only that strange, quiet feeling you get when someone you once knew starts to feel, like a memory wearing skin. I can't live in this silence forever, she said softly, her voice rough from a sleepless night. And I can't live with a contract, I replied. We looked at each other for a long time, not like two people in an argument, but like two people who finally understood there was nothing left to win. I tore it up last night, she said, sliding a small piece of paper toward me. It was the remains of the agreement shredded, only the title still visible. Domestic Compensation Agreement. I don't want to calculate anymore, she said quietly. but I don't know how to love when all I feel is fear. I nodded slowly. No one does, Sarah. People learn when they're ready to trust again. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Do you still want to get married? That question, light as air, but heavy as truth, hung between us. I looked at the torn paper, then at her. She wasn't the cold, logical woman demanding fairness anymore. She was someone trying to understand herself again. Love doesn't need a contract, I said, but it does need two people who want to stay. She looked down, then up again. Her voice was a whisper. Maybe we should start over. Not as a wedding, just as two people learning how to trust. I nodded. Maybe. We sat there, no hand-holding, no promises, no dramatic apologies. But in that silence, something returned. Small, fragile, real, warm. Outside traffic began to hum. A new day. No one knew what would come next. Maybe we'd drift apart. Or maybe, for the first time, we'd finally begin. I looked at her and said quietly, no signatures, just honesty. She smiled faintly, but genuinely, and replied, then let's see how long love can last this time. We both knew there was no answer, but at least now, for the first time in a long time, we were finally sitting on the same side of the table.